Okay, let's look at the Islamic world. Now that we're leading into the Middle Ages, you understand Islam is going to come about around the 7th century, so about 600 or so, late 6th century time period. So as Rome is falling and you have the issue there, and the Byzantine Empire is where it is and where it's grown, Islam is going to pop up out of the old Persian Empire and kind of begin to move itself forward. So to understand why there is tension between Christianity and Islam, we got to understand what Islam is first before we move into the rest of the Middle Ages. So the first thing, it does take shape from the former Persian Empire. We know about the Persians from the time dealing with Alexander the Great, and they had been a large empire. Now, of course, all that influence, especially from Greek and Roman culture, had been in the Middle East. So it's kind of a mixture of all these blending cultures that are going on, which is why Islam is so very familiar and very similar to Christianity and Judaism, simply because they had taken that time to kind of put all that stuff together and kind of blend their own type of lifestyle. But it is coming out of the former Persian Empire. All right, and of course it does start with nomads. We know nomads are people who are moving. So you have Bedouin nomads who are in the area, and the Bedouin is a tribe, and they are pastoral as well. And we know this with Judaism. Pastoral means a herding community. They are following their herds to kind of survive. And understand this too, you're dealing with a part of the world where it is very it's very desolate, not very hard to farm, not very easy to farm, so very difficult. So this is a tough group of people that are roaming the deserts of the old Persian Empire. So moving forward, that's going to have a lot of influence on how Islam is going to kind of develop. And if you look at this, the big deal with the Bedouin nomads is their idea of courage, their idea of loyalty, and warrior skill. Okay, these are all going to be important to Islam as we go along, because Islam is very loyal to Allah, all loyal to its God, and they're going to be very loyal to the teachings of Muhammad. The idea of the warrior skill will come in protecting themselves and spreading the religion. And of course, Islam will build into a very vast growth of expansive land because of the warrior skill, plus the idea of the jihad, which we'll talk about later, and then courage. You know, in Islam, it's a belief, it's a strict belief structure where you are born into the faith, your parents speak some words saying that you are a believer in Allah, and then you are Islamic, you are a Muslim, much different than Christianity, where you have to accept the faith. Okay? So, the Bedouins and other cultures move from place to place, and of course we know with this, what's going on in Arabia is the Silk Road trade, and one of the places it's going to run through, the Silk Road trade is going to run through, is the city of Mecca. And Mecca is going to become one of the holiest places in the world for Muslims, because the Bedouins were trading there as well. So cultures were coming through. You have cultural diffusion in Mecca, and the Bedouins were there. So the reason they went to Mecca, all right, is because this was also the holy place that was able to be worshipped for Abraham. Now we look at Abraham, that is Judaism, but we know with Judaism, Christianity, and now Islam, they are all what are called Abrahamic religions. They all stem from Abraham. Abraham getting the early covenant with God. These are the chosen people. The idea that the Messiah is going to come through past Abraham, which will be Jesus, and then of course Abraham being what is considered an early prophet of Islamic culture as well. And Mecca is going to be the place where that worship's going on, plus it's a cultural hub, and there's tons of trade going there. All right, the place where they met was a place called the Kaaba. All right, this is important, so make sure you highlight this and underline it's the Kaaba. And here is the picture of the Kaaba. Today, this is the holiest place to worship in all of Islam, and you make your pilgrimages there, the Hajj. And of course, we were within the Hajj month for Islam. You go there and you pray, and in this large black box is believed to be a meteor that was sent from God, and they had kind of built this trading empire around it, and then eventually a mosque was built around it. You can see the people down here are all praying towards the Kaaba. When Muslims pray, they pray towards the Kaaba in the direction of the Kaaba. All right, so what you start to see is these Arabs are going to start changing their name, their idea of God, and instead of calling it Yahweh, which had been the Jewish God, they're going to call God Allah, and Allah is the Arabic word for God. Okay. Now, the other thing is when the Bedouins are settling, and they're settling around Mecca, there are different clans, and clans are small family groups start to gain power. One of those groups is going to be called the Quraysh, and don't worry about that name right now, but they're going to gain a lot of power, and they're going to become very important merchants there for Islam and there in Mecca, and they're also going to start to become more and more religious, more actively involved. What is going on is these different cultures and religious ideas start to come through the Kaaba. Okay? One of these men, and he's the one you have to know when it comes to Islam, is the Prophet Muhammad. Now, he's not a prophet yet, but Muhammad will be the prophet of Islam, and he is a merchant. He is living in Mecca. He is part of this very wealthy merchant family, this wealthy merchant clan, and he's become very powerful because of it, and I think it's going to really help push Islam forward because of his influence and what he is able to do because of who he was. He marries a wealthy woman who is a merchant. So there's a lot of power being given there between those two families as Muhammad begins to take shape as who he is. Now understand, Muhammad struggled with his religion. So he used to go out to the caves that were around Mecca, and he was meditating when he was visited by the angel Gabriel. Now Gabriel had been around before. Gabriel is possibly the angel that visited Abraham when he was asked to sacrifice his only son. Gabriel was possibly the same angel that visited Mary to let her know she was pregnant with Jesus Christ. So Gabriel, this idea of an angel coming in and speaking to prophets or speaking to people who are religious is very, very important. And the belief in Islam is that Gabriel spoke the word of God to Muhammad. Now notice I have Muhammad spelled a little differently here with an O. Either one is acceptable. You can spell with an O or a U. It does not matter. Either one is acceptable. But Gabriel spoke the word of God to Muhammad. And what Muhammad began to do was basically preach those words. And that is what will turn into the Quran, because the belief is that Muhammad is the last of the prophets who is going to help fix all the chosen people. The belief for Islam is that Judaism and Jews were God's people but fell off the track, fell off the righteous track, and that the Christians were the same way, that there was too much ceremony and too much having to actually believe instead of just believing like in Islam. So the Christians fell off the track, and then Muhammad is the last of the prophets. And if you look back at the prophets that Islam believes in, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus are ones leading up to Muhammad. And of course the entire Quran is based on Muhammad's preachings and the word, the revelation that God had given to him. Alright, so he begins to preach. This religion is called Islam. Just so you understand, Islam means submission to the will of Allah. It's a big deal. If you are a part of Islam, you are what's considered a Muslim. Muslims, and the word Muslim means you have submitted, or you have given up all your belief, given up all your ideas and given your faith to Allah. So now you are a Muslim. Okay, so the people understand. The people of Mecca, of course, it's a trading city. The people of Mecca are very worried about Muhammad and his teachings, and they feel like it's going to push other religions away and not make the pilgrimage to Mecca if Islam is around and not basically trade. They're going to lose money. One thing you got to understand about history is if you're hurting someone's pocketbook, it becomes a very big deal. So in this case, you're dealing with Islam, and you're dealing with the idea that it's going to affect trade. Okay, so Muhammad is actually kicked out of Mecca, and he leaves Mecca. When he leaves Mecca, he goes 200 miles north to the city of Medina. Okay, and there he is going to gain a ton of followers. He's going to get people to convert to Islam, and this is called the Hijrah. And in the Hijrah, Muhammad is going to go ahead and get these followers and go ahead and come back to Mecca. And when he returns to Mecca roughly 2 years later, he is going to be able to conquer it. And that's part of the whole idea of warrior skill, is that people are going to fight for religion and going to die for religion. So he had to gain followers who are willing to come back and fight and die for religion. Okay, so Muhammad does return to conquer Mecca. Once he conquers Mecca, Mecca becomes the holy city of Islam and is able to push forward. Now, during this time, Muhammad is going to make, and this is a big part of faith, he is going to make what's called a midnight journey to the city of Jerusalem. And now he's going to be, supposedly through Islamic belief, he is lifted out of Mecca and he is sent through the heavens to Jerusalem, where in Jerusalem he sits down with Abraham and Jesus and kind of develops this religion of Islam. And then when he returns to Mecca, it becomes more of a preaching idea to push the religion forward. So, some keys to Islam. First big one. all right, is a mosque. A mosque is the Islamic house of worship. Okay, this is like a church or a temple, depending on the religion. This is where they go to pray. Here's an example of a mosque. Notice you have the domes, the arches. It's squared off. This is big because of algebra. This is big because of architecture in Islamic culture. You also have the minarets that you can see, the tall spires. It's known that in Islam, a caliph will get upon these spires, get up in these minarets, and get into these towers and call the people to prayer. Understanding Christianity, they're called to prayer through bells. This is done through human voice because they believe that that's Allah's voice being spoken. Traditionally, only Muslims enter a mosque. You must take off your shoes and clean your feet. If you think about it, they're in the desert and you're going into a holy place. You must wash your feet and cleanse yourself before you enter this holy place. Now, today, if you want to enter a mosque to see what it looks like, you can set up an appointment and go in. But for holy worship, it is meant only for Muslims. Okay? The holy book is called the Quran. These are a collection of Muhammad's revelations from Allah, from God. If you notice the spellings, this is the Arabic spelling of Quran. This is the Americanized or English spelling of Quran. Both of them are very acceptable, and you'll see both in a quiz or in a test. All right, the 5 pillars of faith, and these are huge. All right, and they kind of stack on top of one another. The first big one is the idea you have to believe, you have to have faith. And when Muslims are born, they are told right away that they have faith. Okay, the second one is prayer. This constant reminder of submitting yourself to Allah, praying 5 times a day. Once in the early morning, once mid-morning, once at midday, once in mid-afternoon, and once at night. This constant reminder of prayer, facing towards the east, and submitting is very huge to the faithful of Islam. This idea of giving alms, charity, giving of yourself to others to help them out. You know, that's where I think Islam gets a pretty bad rap sometimes, is there are a lot of positive, peaceful messages in Islam. However, it's kind of misconstrued by those people who do not act that way. So this idea of giving alms, giving charity to others, is a big part of Islam. Fasting during the month of Ramadan. Now, the month of Ramadan rotates. It follows the lunar calendar. But during this time, it's abstention from eating from sun up to sundown, and then partying, or not partying, I should say, but enjoying life when the sun is down. But the idea that you can subject yourself and submit yourself and let Allah kind of protect you and guide you and feed you, hypothetically, during this month becomes a very important part of the Islamic faith. And of course, the last one is making a pilgrimage or a Hajj to Mecca at least once in your lifetime, to go to the holy city to pray with other Muslims from around the world becomes very, very important. Now, this term jihad has become kind of controversial. You have jihad, which is an inner struggle against evil. Think of it in a Christian sense like dealing with sin and what you're going to do to stop sin. So jihad really has 2 meanings in the Quran. This is the first one, dealing with this inner struggle against evil. The second meaning of a jihad is a struggle against people who don't believe. The idea is that they wanted to get converts, people who come into the faith. However, if they're not going to do it and they're going to fight against it, then it's this fight against these non-believers. And that's going to be a big part of the expansion of Islam. When we get to Saladin and the Crusades, Saladin is going to really amplify this idea of jihad against the Christians trying to take over what they believe was their holy land. Let's skip that question. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here. I want to make another short video for the lasting effects of Islam.